Joining us, which is just the perfect lead-in to this, is our very good friend Stephen Yates. This is his wheelhouse as a foreign policy expert with the D.C. International Advisory, having previously advised the former Bush administration. Stephen, always good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. This was very interesting to watch, and it was... I was squirming the whole time I watched it because Andrew Marr was not letting him off the hook, and that is real journalism. And when you compare it to what we've been seeing here in the United States, I've not seen any interview anywhere even remotely close to what I saw here with Andrew Marr questioning this ambassador. And then he denies it and then tries to insult Western intelligence. I have to get your take on this.
Well, I totally agree. It's a glorious exception to what has been the rule over the recent decades, where major media, major corporations, and frankly, a lot of leaders in politics all around the world have bowed to the emperor in China. They'll drag their own elected leaders through broken glass in front of everyone, but then they put on the kid gloves when they bring in a Chinese leader. The Chinese Foreign Ministry and its ambassadors have been really aggressive in the last year in criticizing everyone else and pushing their propaganda. So this is actually a miraculous first time in recent memory of a major news organization with a Chinese mouthpiece right there in their cat's paw saying politely all the way through, but what is this, Mr. Ambassador? What is this? Well, it happens to be genocide. It happens to be an area that's been colonized by the Communist Party of China. And he happens to be lying about it entirely. And yes, the population grew in recent years because they moved ethnically Han people from the eastern part of China to try to completely take over and erase the ethnicity that has occupied that territory for millennia. So we have a woke conversation in America about this, but in China, it's whatever the Communist Party says. And apparently the BBC has finally reached its limit on taking it.
Wow. And clearly, because he was not letting him go in this 3-minute clip. You said something that was interesting because it dovetails with a piece that I was reading on China's newfound assertiveness. Well, because it's not to say that they have not been aggressive or assertive, but it's always kind of been under the table. But now they're engaging in, name calling in newspapers. And is this just because it's a intensified reaction due to the coronavirus and pretty much every country in the world is mad at China over this? Or is there something else that maybe we are not prepared for that's fueling this?
Well, I've watched the Chinese government and its politics for a long time, and we're always, even at best of circumstances, watching somewhat from a distance. People who call themselves China experts don't really have any inside information about what the real deliberations are among the top leadership of the Communist Party. Never have, probably never will until the Communist Party is toppled. And so when we look at what's happening in China, all we can really deal with are the symptoms that come before us. And it does seem like something has profoundly changed in China in recent years. Some of it is a different approach by the current leader, Xi Jinping. He's a little bit of a revival of Mao, which everyone kind of thought was cute in a way at the beginning. But now we see somewhat of a revival of a cultural revolution in China, massive clampdown on things in Hong Kong that the world, I think, wanted to look away from, but can't look away from. And now we're just digesting the consequences. So I do think that there's a part of our society and our governments that don't want to believe what they're seeing. They wanted the conventional wisdom that was a warm dream, a bath of conventional wisdom that everything's just going to work out. But the Chinese government seems intent on making us see it and making us deal with them, fangs and all.
Yeah, definitely. So some good news, and then I want to talk about China's relationship to the lockdown. But the last time we spoke about this, I think this was something that Britain was considering rejecting, but now it's official because Britain has told Huawei that geopolitical, they basically banned them. They banned this Chinese company with their communist support from Britain's 5G telecoms network. They said it's for geopolitical reasons, but apparently the way that the Guardian is putting it, some of it was huge pressure from Trump, which to me feels a little bit uncharitable because there seemed to have been a lot of objections within Britain's own government as well. And I would imagine that probably even was louder than the objections from the United States. What is your thought on this? And why would they, because the way that the Guardian's putting it and the way the Observer is putting it is that, well, this is just pressure from Trump, as though that's a pejorative. Your thought?
Right. Well, I think I think the Trump administration has actually been consistent and strong on this. But also, if you look at Ajit Pai as a leader of the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, they've had consistent meetings and recently had another meeting that spoke very clearly about the dangers of Chinese technology, spoke about Huawei as a company looking at things 5G. And there's been an effort to do what a lot of liberals and others have said all along of being multilateral, going out and dealing with allies and getting allies on board. And yes, there are a lot of people in Great Britain who have seen this clearly and advocated with their own system for a long time. And there are people in other countries that have come on board. The UK is somewhat behind Australia and some of our other partners in moving in this direction. So it would be a mistake to see it as Trump only, but we are smack in the middle of maximum Trump derangement syndrome. So, of course, nothing in the world happens that doesn't begin and end with President Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Just like blaming the administration for everything from the lockdown to, some of the discussion that I've seen as it relates to the mask wars and the lockdown is that China would love to see the United States go into another lockdown period. China would love to see the United States do for the second time what we did previously, over a month ago. And I feel like there's a lot of merit in that. What are your thoughts? Because I realize that the left doesn't want to listen to the right. The right obviously is suspicious of the left. But what's the straight answer? Because I think it would benefit China, but then at the same time, doesn't China depend a lot, at least economically, on the United States?
Well, I think just analytically getting away from American politics, there is something that is not well inside the People's Republic of China. They have had economic strains. They've had a structural change in their population. And in recent years, it's not just been the United States that's discovered it's gotten a raw deal from China and that it's gotten too many advantages from the so-called international community. So things had been trending in a difficult direction inside China, and it probably has implications for the Chinese leadership, its durability, et cetera. And all of its movements in recent years are not movements based on strength. It's made out of weakness or suspicion that they might be threatened from within. They blame foreigners and outsiders, but really they're afraid of the Chinese people themselves. So that happens separate and apart from what our feelings are about our politics and our president. Now, I do think that American policy has moved profoundly in a different direction. Whether Joe Biden can ignore his 50-year record of, frankly, appeasement and acceptance of Communist Party rule in China, rhetorically, he'll try to pivot, and some of his advisors will want to keep some of the Trump rhetoric in place. But ultimately, they talk about going back to multilateral organizations that have failed consistently and dialogue. And it's not as if these tough guys in China really are that scared of sitting down and clanking champagne and having dialogue.
Right, exactly. They're not scared. Not at all. A couple of things that I want to touch on. Obviously, the latest with Hong Kong, because I read that Britain is now, they confirmed that they're going to suspend the extradition treaty over national security law. They've cut off extradition arrangements and arms exports with Hong Kong authorities after China passed, after their edict where they're just assuming control over Hong Kong. This follows the United States essentially doing the same and ending certain exceptions for Hong Kong as well. It's so bad. And I see all of these countries too hit with the accusation that they're not standing with Hong Kongers, which isn't true. I feel like this is like a 4D kind of chess that must be played that isn't going to be obvious for those who want to make it, who just want to take it like, oh, well, this is not Trump standing with Hong Kongers, or this isn't Boris Johnson standing with Hong Kongers. It's a lot more than that, because you're not going to be able to go about resolving this the obvious way, correct?
Well, anybody that is truly concerned about trying to understand where the pan-Democrats or the broader freedom movement in Hong Kong is on these things is welcome to follow Jimmy Lai on Twitter. He is the founder and owner of Apple Daily, but he's also a tremendous human being. And while he isn't elected to represent anyone, he does actually give voice to what a lot of Hong Kongers are thinking and feeling in this. And we're all in a bad place. Ultimately, Britain made a bad deal to give sovereignty back to the People's Republic of China. Ultimately, the people of Hong Kong woke up somewhat late in their tenure to the realities of how hard the PRC clampdown was going to be. But frankly, the whole world was somewhat blindsided because maybe they wanted to be blindsided that the PRC was going to push hard now for ultimate outcomes. And so everything the US government has been doing has had lots of consultation with the freedom movement in Hong Kong, and we're in a tragic place. A lot of these policies do penalize the people of Hong Kong, but the actions of their government at the Hong Kong level, but also at the Beijing level, have taken the choice away from us. And I think the people of Hong Kong understand and hope we'll just stay with them through this and give whatever support we can.
Is it fair to say, when I see tweets like Mark Cuban's, for instance, and he's been going back and forth with Ted Cruz on this topic all afternoon. And
spicy tweets.
Oh, yeah, pretty spicy. Because he said that Ted Cruz had asked him, can you say free Hong Kong? Can your players put that on their jerseys? Can you condemn the CCP's concentration camps with 1 million Uyghurs? Can you say anything other than, and he was joking, Chairman Mao is beautiful and wise. And so Cuban was going back and says, if you think I won't criticize China and what they do, but he's still kind of sidestepping the issue. Is it fair to say that people like Mark Cuban and others, whether they be in the NBA or whether they be in Hollywood, those who work with companies like Tencent, for instance, isn't working and legitimizing what these companies that are absolutely woven into the Communist Party there? Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to be as profitable as they are within China. I mean, you have to have that Communist Party's permission, as I understand it, to work and be profitable over there. Doesn't this aid them even more so than anyone else? Would you say that they're culpable in pushing and expanding the Communist Party's influence and takeover because they continue to legitimize them at this level?
Yeah, I think I have a very small amount of sympathy, but maybe a tiny bit, for the facts of the world having just sifted out from under a lot of our entertainers, business leaders, and political leaders. But just because you've been mugged by reality doesn't excuse the fact that you're stuck on the horns of a dilemma. You say you won't get involved in another country's international affairs, okay, but then you're the National Basketball Association, who wants to kneel for our national anthem and doesn't necessarily want to identify with the United States and its founding. So which are you? Are you a multinational corporation that's just in it for shareholder value? Or are you the National Basketball Association and you are involved in American politics and you do represent some of the values of America? And I think that they have to face the reality that they put themselves on the horns of this dilemma, and their partners in Beijing are the ones putting them in the bad spot, not President Trump, not the American people, not American politics. And I think it's time that they have to face up to this, tough choices. Yeah. But that's why they get billions and billions of dollars to be entertainers. And maybe they shouldn't forget who their audience and customers are.
Absolutely. It's so sad that when we have these massive global threats like what's happening in China, the South China Sea, which is, another topic. We'll have to save that for another time. But we have the petty the orange man derangement syndrome. We have that to deal with instead of looking at these bigger threats, which are very, very dangerous indeed. Stephen Yates at Yates DCIA on Twitter. Always appreciate your expertise, my friend. Thank you.